The richest man in the whole Montana Territory had just run off his 20th bride in 6 months, right before the gunshot cracked through the air. Ethan Blackwood didn't even jump. He was used to the sound of folks getting desperate out on his frozen land. But he sure was not expecting to see a woman at his gate the next morning, standing all by herself and asking for nothing. In a world where every last person wanted a piece of him, she was the only one who did not. This is the story of how a cold-hearted cattleman finally opened his door, only to find that the one bride nobody else wanted was the only one he ever needed. Stick around to the end. Hit that like button and tell me what city you are from in the comments so I can see how far this story goes. That winter of 1882 came down on northern Montana like a hammer. It was quick, it was final, and it did not forgive. Snow piled up in drifts so high they swallowed fence posts, and the wind had a bite that could steal the hope right out of a man. But inside the Blackwood ranch house, a different kind of cold had settled in. This cold had nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with the man who owned the place. Ethan Blackwood stood by his study window, a glass of whiskey forgotten in his hand. He watched the last carriage vanish down the long road leading away from his land. That carriage rocked through the snow, taking another rejected bride back to whatever big city cooked up her dreams. He had stopped keeping count a long time ago. Was she number 18 or maybe 20? They all started to look the same. These women showed up with their practiced smiles and their rehearsed questions. Their eyes were always wandering, sizing up the big rooms and the fancy furniture, taking stock of his money. A voice came from the doorway. "Boss, that was the Hendrickson girl you just sent off." Samuel, his foreman for 15 years, stood there holding his hat. He looked worried and a little bit tired of all this. "Her daddy is not going to be happy." "That was the third daughter he sent you," Ethan answered without even looking away from the window. "Then maybe Mr. Hendrickson should teach his girls that a man is more than what he has in the bank." His voice was smooth, like someone who had spent years back east in Boston. But underneath that smoothness, there was something sharp. Samuel shifted his feet, making the floorboards groan. "Folks in town are starting to gossip, Ethan. They say you are impossible to please. Some are saying even worse things. They claim you are too proud and think you are better than everyone else." "Let them talk," Ethan said, finally turning around. At 34 years old, he was a man in his prime. He was tall, with broad shoulders, dark hair, and eyes the color of a thunderstorm. His face was handsome but hard, all sharp lines and a stubborn jaw. It was the kind of face you might see on a wanted poster or in a fancy painting. "Their talk does not change a thing." "Maybe not," Samuel admitted, stepping into the room. He had known Ethan since he was just a boy and watched him build walls around himself. But this winter is only going to get meaner. A man should not spend it by himself in a house this big. Ethan's face did not change, but for a second something flickered in his eyes before he hid it away. "I am not alone. I have 40 ranch hands, a house staff of 12, and a never-ending line of women wanting to get married. You know that is not what I mean. Then you should say what you mean, Samuel." The older man let out a long sigh. He knew that tone of voice. "I mean that having folks around is not the same as having someone with you. There is a world of difference between a full house and a full heart, and you only have one of those." Ethan took a long swallow of his whiskey. "My heart works just fine, I can promise you that. It pumps blood well enough to keep me standing here listening to your advice I did not ask for. There was a time you were not like this," Samuel said, his voice soft but steady. "There was a time you believed in something." "That was a long time ago," Ethan snapped, his voice turning low and dangerous. "And that time is gone. I built this ranch into the biggest operation in 3 territories. I give more men work than anyone around here. I made myself into something that matters. That ought to be enough." "Enough for what?" "Enough for who?" Samuel asked. But Ethan had already turned back to the window, ending the conversation. When the foreman left, Ethan let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He just saw his own reflection staring back from the dark glass. He was a man with everything a person could want, but he was drowning in the quiet. The Blackwood Ranch was truly something to see. His grandfather had claimed the land back in the 1840s, but Ethan was the one who turned it into an empire. The main house was a monument to his success, built with 3 stories of fine timber and stone. Inside, chandeliers from New York hung from the ceilings, and the furniture came all the way from Chicago. Every single part of that house was meant to show off his wealth, but all of it felt empty. That evening, Ethan moved through the rooms like a ghost in his own home. He ate all by himself at a dining table big enough for 20 people. The only sound was the quiet footsteps of his servants. His bedroom was bigger than most folks' entire houses, with a giant bed he only ever slept on one side of. It felt like admitting a defeat he refused to speak out loud. He had built all of this for a reason, but that reason had turned bitter long ago. It had been 7 years, but it felt like yesterday and 100 years all at once. There was a time he thought love was real. He once trusted that someone could want him for who he was, not for what he had. Her name was Margaret. She had a smile that could light up the darkest room and a laugh that made anything seem possible. They met in Boston, where Ethan had gone to study how to run a modern ranch. Margaret was a banker's daughter, educated and sophisticated. For 2 years, Ethan was sure he had found something real in a city that was full of fakes. He asked her to marry him one spring evening, giving her a ring that cost him everything he had saved. She cried and said yes, and in that moment he felt like he could take on the entire world. Then his father died suddenly, and Ethan had to rush back to Montana to save the struggling ranch. He expected Margaret to come with him just like they had planned. Instead, she sat him down and explained so very kindly that she could not possibly leave Boston for some wild frontier. She told him she assumed he would eventually come back to civilization. "I do care about you, Ethan," she had said, and he could still hear the pity in her voice. "But I cannot live like that. I am not made for a hard country and a future that is not certain." He understood then that her love came with conditions. When she had to choose between him and her comfortable life, she did not hesitate. He went back to Montana by himself, broken in a way he never truly admitted. He took all that pain and poured it into his work. He built the ranch into something no one could ignore. He built a fortune so large that no one could ever again say he was not good enough. And the irony was, he had turned himself into exactly the kind of powerful, wealthy man Margaret would have wanted. But to do it, he had to kill the part of himself that had been open enough to love her in the first place. Now women came to him one after another, but he could see right through them all. He saw it in the Hendrickson girls with their fake charm, and the Morrison girl who spent her whole visit making a list of his belongings with her eyes. He especially saw it in the Turner woman, who had the nerve to ask about his life insurance policy before he even showed her the door. They all wanted the empire he had built. They wanted the security and the status that came with his name. Not a single one of them had bothered to ask him what he dreamed about. None of them wondered what scared him or what kept him up at night. They looked at him and saw the answer to their problems, a quick fix for a better life. None of them really saw him at all. "Maybe it is for the best," he whispered to himself that night, standing on his balcony in the freezing cold. The whole ranch spread out before him, all of it his. It was better to be alone than to be seen as nothing more than a walking bank account. Down in the bunkhouse, Samuel sat with some of the older ranch hands, men who remembered a younger, happier Ethan who was quicker to laugh. "He sent another one away, did he not?" asked Robert, the head wrangler. Samuel packed his pipe and nodded. "That Hendrickson girl was a sweet thing, sure. Would have made a fine wife for some fella, but not for Ethan. Young Thomas, only 3 years on the ranch, could not figure it out." "The man has it all," he said. "Land, money, and the respect of every man in the valley. Any woman would count herself lucky." Samuel took a long draw from his pipe. "And that is the whole problem right there. He is not looking for a woman who feels lucky. He is looking for one who wants the man, not the ranch." "What is the difference?" Thomas asked. Robert shook his head slow. "Son, one is about what you can get. The other is about who you stand with. Ethan learned that lesson the hard way." "Sounds like a lonely life," Thomas murmured. "It is," Samuel said softly. "He built a castle around himself, and now he cannot find the door out. A woman who does not need him one bit. Someone with her own fire, her own strength. All these girls coming around are looking for a man to complete them. Ethan needs a woman who is already whole." "That is a tall order," Samuel grumbled. "A woman like that is not looking for a ring. She is too busy living." "Maybe," Robert said, "but that might be the very reason it would work." Up in that big, quiet house, Ethan finally came in from the bitter cold. He walked through dark, empty rooms where his boots echoed on the floorboards. In his study, he poured a whiskey and stared at the wedding portrait on the wall. His father, a hard and proud man. His mother, who loved him anyway. They had something real, something he feared he would never find. He wondered if that kind of love had died with his mother, or if he was the one who had changed. The whiskey burned, but offered no warmth. Dawn broke gray and bitter. Ethan was up early, dressed in his usual denim and flannel. He was in the stables tending to a mare with a hurt leg when Samuel found him. "Boss, there is a woman at the gate." Ethan kept his focus on the horse. "Tell her father the answer is no." "I do not think her father is in the picture," Samuel said carefully. "And she sure did not come in a carriage." Ethan finally looked up. "What are you saying, Samuel?" "I am saying she rode up on a worn-out horse and asked for a minute of your time. Real polite about it, too. She gave a name. Clara Hale. She said she has been at the Morrison place for the past 6 months, but they are shutting it down for the winter. She is looking for a job, boss. Not a marriage proposal." Ethan stood up straight, wiping his hands on his jeans. A job. In all this time, not a single woman had come here asking for honest work. "What kind of work?" "She just said she was capable and wanted a chance to prove it." Samuel's steady gaze told Ethan this was something different. The foreman did not play games. "Where is she now?" "Still at the gate." His gut told him to send her away to keep things uncomplicated, but for the first time in a long time, he was curious. "All right. Bring her to the kitchen. Give me 10 minutes." Ethan walked slowly from the stables, trying to figure what he was walking into. A woman looking for work in the middle of winter was either desperate or stubborn as a mule. He was not sure which was worse. In the warm kitchen, his cook Martha gave him a questioning look as Samuel led the visitor inside. Clara Hale was not what he expected. The other women wore their finest dresses and hopeful smiles. This woman was dressed in simple wool, her hair tied back neatly. Her face, scrubbed clean by the wind, had strong bones and startling blue eyes. She was not pretty like they were. She was something else. But what struck him most was her posture. She stood straight and still with a calm look in her eye. She was not there to challenge him, just to state her business. "Mr. Blackwood," she said in a low, steady voice. "Thank you for seeing me." Ethan got right to it. "Samuel tells me you are looking for a job. What can you do?" "Whatever you need," she said plainly. "I can cook, clean, mend, and keep accounts. I can work with horses and livestock. I am strong. I do not cause trouble. And I finish what I start." It was a simple list of facts. He noticed the calluses on her hands. She was not lying. "Where are you from?" "Pennsylvania. I was raised on a farm." "What brought you all the way to Montana?" Just for a second, she paused. "My husband. We came out here 3 years ago. He passed on last spring." "I am sorry for your loss," Ethan said automatically. Her expression was unreadable. "Thank you. But it was not a loss. Our marriage was not a happy one." The plain truth of her words hit him hard. Any other woman would have used it for sympathy. "The Morrisons took me on after, but they have returned to Boston for good." "So, why come here?" Ethan asked. "To this ranch?" For the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. "Because you have a reputation, Mr. Blackwood. The whole county knows you have been turning away women looking for a ring. I figured a man who does not want a wife might just be in need of a good worker." All she wanted was a job. The thought was so unexpected and made so much sense that Ethan nearly chuckled. "So you have no interest in getting married?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I have been married once," Clara stated plainly. That was quite enough. Ethan could tell there was more to that story, something tougher than just a husband's passing. But before he could ask, she continued, "I am not here to make your life complicated, Mr. Blackwood. I am here because a hard winter is on its way. I need a job, and you have work that needs to be done. That is it, just fair pay for honest work." Ethan looked at her, really studied her, and saw a woman different from all the others. There was no scheming in her eyes, no sizing up his wealth, just plain honesty and a readiness to work hard. It should have made him hire her on the spot. Instead, it made him wary. "Nobody is that straightforward, Mrs. Hale," he said. "Everyone wants more than just a wage." "It is Mrs. Hale," she corrected him softly. "I am a widow, and you are right. I want a warm place to sleep and food on the table. I want work that feels important and pay I can put away for a rainy day. I want to stop worrying if I will survive until spring. But I am ready to earn every bit of it, Mr. Blackwood. This is not a request for charity. I am offering you my labor in exchange for payment." Martha, the cook, who had been chopping vegetables with far too much energy, cleared her throat. "Boss, if you are asking me, I could sure use another hand in this kitchen." Ethan gave his cook a look that said he knew what she was up to, but Martha just gave him a calm smile. He turned back to Clara. She just stood there in his kitchen, with quiet dignity and cheeks red from the cold. "You understand this is just a job," Ethan said, drawing the words out. "Nothing more. I will not have anyone getting the wrong idea." "I understand completely," Clara answered. "You do not want a wife. I do not want a husband. That makes us a good match for an employer and an employee, does it not?" Her tone was completely serious, just simple facts, and maybe that is what made Ethan agree. "All right, a 2-week trial. You will help Martha in the kitchen and with running the house. Room and board are included. If you work out, we can talk about a permanent job. If not, you will leave with 2 weeks of pay." "That is fair," Clara said, and her smile this time was real, making her face compelling. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. You will not be sorry." "We will see about that," Ethan replied. But as he said it, he felt a small shift inside him, like a tiny crack in a wall he had built. He told himself she was just another employee, a practical solution to a problem. But as he watched Clara take off her worn coat and roll up her sleeves to help Martha, he felt something he had not felt in 7 long years. It might have been hope, but he refused to call it that. He pushed the feeling down and went back into the cold Montana morning to look over his ranch, reminding himself that he did not need anyone. For the first 3 days, they kept their distance. Clara moved around the house quietly and efficiently, like she had always been there. She was up before the sun, helping Martha cook a huge breakfast for all the ranch hands. By the time Ethan came downstairs, the kitchen smelled of coffee and bacon, and Clara was already cleaning up. He found himself watching her. She never wasted a single movement. When she cleaned a room, she did not just dust, she rearranged things so they made more sense. When she mended shirts for the Cowboys, her stitches were small and perfect. "She is a good one," Martha told him on the 3rd night, finding him in his study. "That cook had been with his family for 20 years and could say what she wanted. She has a good head on her shoulders. Does not need to be told what to do all the time." 3 of the hands brought her their torn gear today, and she fixed it all. Even improved a saddlebag so it could hold more. Ethan looked up from his account books. "And your point is?" "Just thought you should know you made a good choice, even if you did it for your own stubborn reasons." "I hired her because you said you needed help." "I said I could use help," Martha corrected. "But I'm glad you did. This house has been too quiet for too long." After Martha went out, Ethan sat in the dark. He could hear the faint murmur of Clara's and Martha's voices as they cleaned up. It was the sound of a house truly being lived in. On the fourth day, everything changed. Ethan was out in the north pasture with his foreman Samuel, checking on the cattle before a big storm hit. The sky was a heavy gray that promised a lot of snow. Suddenly, a young ranch hand named Billy came riding up fast, which always meant trouble. "Boss, we have got a problem at the house," Billy yelled. "One of the new mares got spooked. She kicked her stall to pieces and cut herself up something awful. Martha sent me to get you." Ethan was on his horse before the boy finished talking. "How bad is she?" "Pretty bad. Mrs. Hale is with her trying to keep her from panicking, but there is blood everywhere." They raced back to the main barn. The injured mare was in the biggest stall, her eyes wide with fear. Clara was right there with her, talking to her in a low, steady voice, with one hand on the horse's neck and the other pressing a cloth to the deepest cut. "Easy now, girl," Clara said, her voice amazingly calm. "We are going to help you. I have lost a lot of blood, though. The cuts need to be cleaned and stitched up." "I sent for Doc Hendricks, but he is clear out at the Polson Ranch," Samuel called from outside the stall. "It will be hours before he can get here." The mare could not wait that long. Ethan looked at Clara, who was still keeping the 1,000-pound animal from going wild. He made a quick decision. "Can you hold her steady while I work?" Clara looked him right in the eye, and all he saw was resolve. "Yes, then stay put. Samuel, get me hot water, clean rags, a needle and heavy thread, and a bottle of whiskey." For the next hour, Ethan stitched the mare's wounds, while Clara kept her calm. All the while, she never stopped that low, soothing murmur, a sound that wrapped around the terrified horse like a warm blanket. "You're doing fine now," Clara whispered, her voice a low hum. "Such a brave girl. I know it hurts, and I know you're scared, but it is all going to be all right. We have got you. You are not in this alone." Ethan was only half listening as he worked, but he knew she was not just talking to the horse. He heard a deep understanding in her voice, a familiarity with pain and fear that came from her own life. When he finally tied the last stitch, his shirt was soaked through with sweat and blood. The mare stood quiet, head hanging low from exhaustion, but Clara's hand never left her neck. "She's going to be just fine," Ethan said, his voice husky. "You did real good work." "So did you," Clara answered. The respect in her eyes made him look away first. Samuel came with fresh blankets and sweet feed for the mare. As they settled the horse, Ethan and Clara walked back to the main house, their breath making clouds in the cold air as snow began to fall. "Where did you learn to gentle a horse like that?" Ethan finally asked. "My daddy kept draft horses on our farm. I learned young they are a lot like people. They just need to know someone is paying attention, that they are not facing their troubles by themselves. Not everyone sees it that way." Clara glanced over at him, her face hard to read. "No, I suppose they do not. Some folks would rather face everything all alone. Safer that way, I guess." "Safer," Ethan repeated, unable to tell if she was talking about him. At the back door, Clara stopped. "Mr. Blackwood, can I ask you something?" "You can ask. Why did you really hire me?" "Martha said you hired me because I did not want a thing from you. But that is not the whole truth, is it? You hired me to prove a point to yourself." Ethan felt his chest tighten up. "And what point do you think I was trying to prove? That you could have someone living in your own house and still keep them a mile away. That you could be near a person without risking a thing." Her voice was soft, but her words hit like stones. "I know it because I am doing the exact same thing. We both are. We are just two people who figured out that wanting things is a dangerous business. So we told ourselves we do not want anything at all." "You do not know a thing about me," Ethan said, the defense in his own voice plain as day. "No, I do not. And you do not know a thing about me. And maybe that is exactly how we both want it to be." Clara opened the door but paused. "For what it is worth, Mr. Blackwood, you were kind to that animal today. The walls you have built around yourself, well, they do not go all the way to the foundation. That is something, at least." She slipped inside, leaving him alone in the snow with a gut full of trouble. Later that night, sleep would not come, so Ethan went to the library. He had built it just for himself, with shelves clear to the ceiling and books from all over. but it felt more like a museum, cold and lifeless. He was watching the snow pile up outside when he heard her soft footsteps. "I could not sleep either," Clara said, her voice quiet. She wore a simple robe, and her hair was down around her shoulders for the first time. It made her look younger, softer. "I am sorry to intrude. I was just looking for a book. You are not intruding. Take any one you want." She ran her fingers over the books. "I have not been in a room like this since I left Pennsylvania. My father had books, but nothing like this. Do you miss it? Pennsylvania?" She thought for a long moment. "I miss the person I was back there. The girl who thought hard work and a good heart were enough to get by. What changed?" She pulled a book from the shelf and turned to face him. The firelight flickered in her eyes. "I married a man I did not love. My father needed the help. His name was Jacob Hale. He had money and land out here. My father had debts and a failing farm. It was a practical match. That is what they all called it." She said the word practical like it tasted foul. "And was it?" Ethan asked before he could stop himself. "Oh, it was very practical. Jacob got a hard-working wife who never complained. My father saved his farm, and I learned just how much of yourself you can lose living with a man who sees you as just a part of a deal. He hurt you, not in the way you are thinking. He never laid a hand on me. But there are slower, quieter ways to break a person, Mr. Blackwood. Jacob was not cruel. He was just gone, even when he was standing right there. I was just the woman who cooked his food and mended his clothes. He died in his sleep one night. His heart just gave out. And when I found him, you know what I felt? Not sadness, not even relief, just a whole lot of nothing. That is what scared me the most, that 3 years with that man had hollowed me out completely. But it did not," Ethan said quietly. "I saw you with that mare. You felt plenty." She looked at him then, a long, steady look of someone who sees a reflection of their own scars. "Animals are easier," she said. "They do not pretend to care when they do not. They do not use you up and call it love." The quiet between them was heavy. Then Ethan heard himself speak. "7 years ago, I was set to marry a woman from Boston. Her name was Margaret. I thought she loved me. Turns out, she loved the man she thought I was going to be. A man who could keep her comfortable. When I had to come back here to run this ranch, she ended it. Said she just could not live this kind of life. And that is why you push away any woman who gets close," Clara said. "It was not a question. You are waiting for one who does not want any of this." "I am not waiting for anything," Ethan insisted. He knew it was a lie the second it left his mouth. Clara moved nearer, her face sharp in the firelight. "You are waiting for someone to want you for you, not for what you own. But that is just another kind of deal, Mr. Blackwood. You are still asking for a sacrifice." Her words cut too close to a truth he never faced. "You have made it a test," she said softly. "A woman can want a man and the life he has built. The two are not enemies. I married Jacob for practical reasons. That was a mistake. It was a mistake because there was nothing else. No kindness, no friendship. But if I had cared for him, it would have just been smart." Something inside Ethan fractured. "Then why say you were done looking?" Clara's smile was full of sorrow. "Because I am just as afraid as you are. It is easier to say you need no one than to risk getting hurt again. We are both hiding." The honesty of it all was a heavy relief. He finally felt understood. "I do not know another way to be," he confessed. "I do not know how to want something without expecting it to be taken away." "Neither do I," Clara said. "So we just exist. No tests, no expectations, just two people who understand being afraid." It felt less like defeat and more like peace. "I can do that," Ethan said. As she left, she stopped. "Thank you for not handling me with kid gloves. Jacob always did, and it was just another way of not seeing me." "I will not do that," Ethan promised. He stayed by the dying fire until dawn. They had agreed to keep their walls up, but just admitting the walls were there made them seem smaller. The morning brought work that pushed those thoughts aside. The storm hit hard that night, burying the ranch in 2 feet of snow. The cold was brutal. Everyone worked non-stop to keep the place running. Pipes froze in the house, and Clara worked right alongside the handyman to fix them. Ethan pushed himself to the limit, checking on the livestock and his men, working until he was bone-tired. The hard labor was a welcome distraction. Late that afternoon, he walked into the kitchen, half-frozen and hungry. Clara and Martha were cooking for the crew. The warmth and smell of stew and bread felt like a different world. "Sit down before you fall down," Martha ordered. "Clara, get this man some food." Before he could argue, a bowl of hot stew and a cup of coffee were in front of him. He ate while he watched the two women work together, moving in a comfortable rhythm born of mutual respect. It made something in his chest feel tight. "We need more firewood for the house," Martha said. "And someone needs to check on old Jim." "I will get the wood," Ethan offered. "You will do no such thing," Martha shot back. "You have done enough. Let one of the young bucks handle it." "Stubborn man," Martha grumbled, but she was smiling. Clara looked up from her work, flour on her arms. "The mayor is doing better, by the way. She is putting weight on that leg. You have steady hands. That horse was lucky to have you." The simple praise hit him harder than any compliment about his wealth ever had. It was for what he could do, not what he owned. That evening, the kitchen filled with cold, hungry ranch hands. Their loud talk and laughter filled the room, a friendly noise Ethan usually kept himself apart from. But tonight, Clara was right in the thick of it, trading jokes with the men. When a wrangler named Robert complimented her bread and asked if she was staying for good, she smiled. "That depends on whether you all learn to wipe your boots on the way into my clean kitchen." "Your kitchen?" Martha teased. "Well, I work in it, do not I? That makes it partly mine. Possession is 9/10 of the law." Everyone laughed, even Ethan. She had a spark he had not seen before, as if their talk had let her breathe a little easier. Later, unable to rest, he went to the stables. The quiet dark felt good. Soon, Clara appeared in the doorway. "Figured I would find you here," she said. I wanted to check on her, too. They watched the horse rest in the quiet of the stable. The silence between them was easy. "You were different with the men tonight," Ethan said. "I decided to practice what I preach," she answered. "It felt strange to call you out for hiding while I was still doing it myself." "And how does it feel?" "Scary," she admitted. "But also good. Like I am remembering how to be a real person again." Ethan knew exactly what she meant. "I have been playing a part for 7 years, the successful rancher who has it all." "I think I see the real man," Clara said softly. "The one who came back to save this place. The one who works right beside his men instead of just giving orders." "That person is still in there, Mr. Blackwood. You just buried him deep." "Ethan," he said, "if we are going to have these late-night talks, you ought to call me Ethan." A real smile spread across Clara's face. "All right, Ethan. And I am Clara, not Mrs. Hale. That name belongs to a woman I left behind." They talked for a long while after that about his time in Boston and her girlhood on the farm. It was not romantic. It was just two people, finally being honest in a world that had taught them to be anything but. As he went upstairs, Ethan realized that kind of honesty was its own quiet rebellion. The storm kept them snowed in for 3 days. In that time, the careful distance between Ethan and Clara started to melt away, slow and steady like ice in the spring sun. It was a raw deal that brought Clara to that ranch, a quiet widow with nothing but grit to her name. And Ethan, the boss, was a man locked behind walls so high no one could climb them. This is a story about how sometimes the quietest people make the most noise when it comes to healing a broken heart. You will want to see how this turns out. Without ever saying a word, they fell into a rhythm. Mornings, Ethan would find her in the kitchen before the sun came up, the two of them watching the day begin over snow-covered fields. Evenings, she would read by the fire while he worked his books. The ranch hands, well, they saw it all. Robert spoke low to Samuel in the bunkhouse one night. "I'm just saying it is different." He is smiling again. Not a lot, but it is something. That look he always had, like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop, is gone. Maybe he is just glad to have help in the house that is not looking for a ring, Samuel grumbled back, though he did not sound convinced. But young Thomas from his bunk had a different idea. Or maybe she is not trying to marry him because she knows something all them other women did not. And what would that be? Robert asked. Thomas said, "You cannot take a fort by storm. You gotta wait for the man inside to open the gate himself." And inside that fort, Ethan was finding that a woman who asked for nothing made him want to give her everything. She never asked about his day, so he started telling her. She never dug into his past, so he started sharing pieces of it. It was a Tuesday evening, with the stars popping in a cold, clear sky, when things changed for good. Ethan came in from riding the fence lines, bone-tired and frozen solid. He found Clara in the library, curled up by the fire with that same book she had been reading since she arrived. "Are you still on that thing?" he asked, pulling off his heavy coat. "I am savoring it," she said, not even looking up. A good story should not be rushed. He went to pour a whiskey, but stopped. "Would you like a drink? Whiskey? Or maybe some tea?" "I am not much for spirits. Was it because of your husband?" The question was out before he could catch it, way too personal. But Clara just closed her book. "No, Jacob drank enough for the both of us. I just never cared for it. Too much bite and not enough warmth." Ethan set his own glass down. "I will get you some tea. You do not have to." "I know," he said. "I want to." He came back with 2 cups, having skipped the whiskey altogether. They just sat there for a bit, listening to the fire crackle. "Tell me about Boston," Clara said softly. "What was it like?" Ethan leaned back, the warm cup feeling good in his hands. "Loud, crowded, full of people in a hurry. I was there for 2 years, studying farming and business. Lived in a boarding house with 6 other fellas. We thought we knew it all. And Margaret? Where did she fit in? She was one of my professor's daughters. I met her at a party. She was serving punch and looked like she would rather be anywhere else. So I asked her why. She said she was supposed to be pretty and charming, but she would rather be in a library reading about the world." Clara smiled. "I like her already. Everybody did. She was smart and funny, and she made me feel like I could be more than just another rancher. We would walk all over that city just talking. She wanted to see Paris and Rome. I wanted to build something that lasted. We made all sorts of wild plans. So what happened? Ethan got real quiet. Reality did. My father died, and I had to come home right away. The ranch was in a bad way. Debts I knew nothing about. I had a choice. Let it all go to pieces and stay in Boston with Margaret, or come back here and fight for it. I chose the ranch. I begged her to come with me. I promised her a big house, travel, everything we planned, just here. She listened, and then she told me she could not live somewhere the nearest bookstore was a 3-day ride away. She said she would be a rancher's wife instead of a professor's daughter. She could not do it. Clara set down her tea. She was not wrong for knowing what she could live with and what she could not. He was stunned. "You are taking her side?" "I am saying she was honest, Ethan. It would have been crueler to marry you and make you both miserable for years. She chose to hurt you once, quick, instead of a little bit every day. It sure did not feel like a kindness." "I am sure it did not," Clara said. "But you got through it. You came back and made this ranch the best in 3 territories. You did what you said you would do. You just did it without her." Ethan looked at her in the firelight and saw understanding in her eyes, not pity. "You do that, you know." "Do what?" "You take the stories I tell myself and you show me a different way to look at them. Maybe that is because I spent 3 years telling myself I was a victim of my husband's coldness. It took me a long time to see I was just as absent as he was. We teach what we most needed to learn." "I never fought for us," Clara said, her voice barely a whisper. "I never demanded more. I just took what he gave, which was nothing, and told myself I was being practical. But I was just being a coward. I was scared that if I asked for love and he said no, it would hurt more than just living with the silence. Then he died, and I realized I had wasted 3 years married to a ghost." "Is that why you came here?" he asked. "Partly. After Jacob died, 2 men in town made me offers. One told me he needed someone to raise his kids and keep his house, and he would marry me in exchange for the work. I told him I would rather starve." Her smile was sharp as a blade. "I saved every cent I made and swore I would never again let a man treat me like a convenience." "Coming here was a risk," she said, her voice fierce now. "But it was better than going back home and admitting my father was right to sell me off. It was better than accepting I was only worth what I could do for a man. I could not go back to being that person, Ethan. So I chose a long shot over a sure thing of shame." In that moment, Ethan felt a wall inside him that he had been building for years finally start to crumble. "You are not small or quiet." "Well, I am quiet," she said softly. "But quiet is not the same thing as small. I am learning the difference." They sat in the growing dark, the fire burning down to embers. But the silence was different now. It was not empty space between two strangers. It was a comfortable quiet, a place where two people who had finally told the truth could just be. "I do not know how to do this," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Do what?" "This. I do not know how to be around someone who sees right through my defenses but does not use them against me. I do not know how to trust that you are not just biding your time to ask for something." Clara stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the moonlit ranch. "I am not waiting for a thing, Ethan. I just want to be here, doing good work, and talking to someone who understands what it is like to be scared of wanting things. If that is all this ever is, it is more than I had before. But what if it becomes more?" The question was out before he could stop it, feeling raw and exposed. Clara turned to him, her expression hidden by the shadows. "Then we will figure that out when it happens. We cannot spend our lives being afraid of what might go wrong. Margaret hurt you, and Jacob hurt me. We both learned to build walls. Sometimes protection is just another word for a prison." Her words echoed in his mind long after she had gone. He sat there in the dark, realizing she was right. He had built his walls so high to keep everyone out that he had locked himself inside. The question was if he had the courage to open the gate. The next morning, trouble arrived right on schedule. Samuel found him in the barn, his face grim. "Boss, we have company. Henry Hendrickson and his wife just rode up." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What does he want?" "He claims it is business, but his wife is with him. My guess is they are here for one more try." "I already said no." "I know," Samuel said. "But they seem to think you can be convinced." Ethan swallowed a curse and strode toward the house with Samuel right on his heels. He found Hendrickson in the study, making himself at home like he owned the place. Women's voices drifted in from the kitchen. "Well now, Blackwood," Hendrickson boomed, getting up to shake his hand. The grip was too strong, the smile too wide. "I appreciate you seeing me. I have a proposal I think you will find mighty interesting. I told you before, Hendrickson, I am not interested in your daughter. I respect that, I surely do. But just hear me out. You are building an empire here. An empire needs powerful friends. My railroad connections could be a great help to you. Together, we could—" "Together," Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. "You mean if I agree to marry your daughter, you will help my ranch? That is what this is about? I am offering a partnership. Your cattle could ride my rails for cheap. My friends in Chicago and New York could open doors. All I ask is you give Elizabeth another thought. She is a good, educated girl. She would be the perfect wife for a man like you." A cold feeling settled deep in Ethan's gut. "A man like me? You know what I mean. A man with your kind of money and power needs a wife who can hold her own in high society. Elizabeth can do all that." "And what about what Elizabeth wants?" Ethan asked, though he already knew. "Did you even ask her if she wanted to marry a man who turned her down once before?" Hendrickson's smile twitched. "Elizabeth knows her duty. She is willing to—" "Stop!" Ethan's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Get out of my house, now. Look here, You are offering a business deal, not a marriage. You are trying to trade your daughter like she is a prize steer. The answer is no, Hendrickson. The answer was no then, and it is no now. My ranch will make it on its own, not because I sold myself for a railroad. Hendrickson's face turned beet red. You are making a huge mistake, Blackwood. A man cannot build an empire all by himself. His voice went cold as ice. You need to leave, and take your wife with you. He turned his back on Hendrickson, leaving the man sputtering. In the kitchen, Mrs. Hendrickson was having tea with Martha, while Clara stood quietly watching everything. Mrs. Hendrickson, Ethan said, his tone leaving no room for argument. It is time for you and your husband to go. We will not be discussing any marriage arrangements. The woman's teacup hit the saucer with a crack. You are being completely unreasonable, Mr. Blackwood. I am sure she is a lovely girl, Ethan said, meeting her angry eyes. I hope she finds a good man. But that man is not me. He held her gaze until she looked away, then waited in silence as she stormed out. Once Samuel had shut the door behind them, the tension finally left the room. Well now, Martha said with a grin. That was something else. The man had the nerve to tell me his daughter's pot roast was famous across 3 counties. I told him mine is famous in 5, Martha sniffed. And I am not trying to marry off anybody. For the first time all day, Ethan almost smiled. He glanced at Clara, who was watching him with a look he could not quite figure out. You all right? She asked softly. I'm fine. Just weary of people who believe everything has a price. Not everything does, Clara said, and the way she said it made him look at her again. That night, Ethan sat in the library with a glass of whiskey, staring into the fire. Clara appeared at the door. You are brooding, she said simply. What is on your mind? He sighed. Hendrickson offered me his daughter like she was a prize heifer at the market. And the saddest part is she probably went right along with it, just doing what a dutiful daughter is told to do. Maybe, Clara said softly. Or maybe she feels just like I did. So sure she does not deserve better that she will take any offer and call it good fortune. Her words hit him hard. Is that what you think of the women who came here? That they were just settling? Some of them, probably. The same way I settled for Jacob. The same way you almost settled for being alone, just so you would not risk getting hurt again. We all settle, Ethan. The real question is if we are doing it out of wisdom or out of fear. How can you tell the difference? She was quiet for a long moment. I think wisdom brings you peace. Fear just makes you feel safe. They might look the same on the outside, but they feel completely different. So, which one am I? He asked. When I send those women away, am I being wise or just afraid? I cannot answer that for you. Ethan drank his whiskey. I do not think I know the difference anymore. I have been safe for so long. I have forgotten what peace feels like. Clara stood up and walked right over to him. She sat on the arm of his chair, close enough that he could smell her clean soap scent in the firelight. Then maybe it is time to remember, she said. Maybe it is time to stop being so safe. I am not saying you should marry for business or for a woman you do not love. I am saying you should stop treating every person like they are a threat. Let someone get close enough to see if peace is even possible. And if you get hurt again, well, at least you will know you tried for something real instead of just hiding from something painful. She stood and walked away before he could think of what to say. Good night, Ethan, she said from the door. He lay awake for hours that night, feeling the walls he had built around himself finally start to crack. The scariest part was that he was starting to hope he might find something good in the rubble. He was at the kitchen table before dawn with his coffee when Clara came down. She poured a cup for herself and sat with him in a comfortable silence as the sun began to rise. The morning peace was broken when Samuel burst through the door covered in snow. Boss, we have a real problem. The north fence is down. The weight of the snow snapped the posts. The cattle are drifting, and if we do not round them up, the wolves will. Ethan was on his feet in an instant, his own troubles forgotten. How many men do we have? Most of them, but it is going to take all day. That is a lot of ground to cover in this deep snow. Get the men saddled up and ready to ride. I will be out in 10 minutes. Ethan turned to Martha. "Pack enough food and coffee for a dozen men for the whole day. I will help," Clara said, heading for the pantry. "Clara, you do not have to do that, I know, but I want to. You will need all the help you can get to cover that much land." "Absolutely not," Ethan said. "It is far too dangerous out there. I grew up on a farm, Ethan. I can ride and I can rope. A little cold does not scare me. You need every hand you can find." Martha grunted. "The girl is talking sense, boss. Your pride is not going to find those steers any faster." Ethan wanted to tell her to stay safe inside the warm house. But he knew she was right. They needed every person they could get. "Fine," he said. "But you stay close to me or Samuel. Do not go wandering off. Understood?" Clara's smile was small, but she had won. Understood. 30 minutes later, they rode out into a world of white snow and howling wind. Everything was buried in white and blue, and the cold was just plain mean. It was the kind of cold that bit right through your coat and into your bones. Clara rode a solid horse from the stables, her face wrapped tight in a scarf, her eyes sharp. They found the busted fence right where Samuel said it would be. The posts were snapped clean from the weight of the snow. Tracks led off in every direction where the cattle had wandered off. Ethan split the men into teams to search different parts of the range. He, Samuel, and Clara took the northeast section. They rode for hours across the endless white, calling out when they found cattle, working to push the spooked animals back. It was hard, miserable work. The cattle were scattered wide and did not want to move. The snow was deep and the cold never let up. But Clara held her own. She never complained, her hands were steady on the reins, and her voice was calm with the animals. Ethan caught himself watching her more than the terrain. He was struck by how she moved with her horse, how she knew what needed to be done without being told. "She is good," Samuel said quietly as they took a short break. "Real good. Not many women from the city could handle this work." "She is not a city woman," Ethan replied, his voice a little defensive. "She knows hard work." "I know, I am just saying you hired well, boss." But they both knew it was more than that. Samuel's knowing glance said it all, and Ethan had to turn away. They worked clear through the afternoon, and by the time the sun began to set, they had gathered most of the herd. They were bone-tired, but it was the good kind of tired that comes from a hard day's work well done. It was on the long ride back, with the cattle moving steadily ahead of them, that things began to shift. A horse's leg punched through a hidden hole in the snow. The animal stumbled hard, and Clara went flying over its neck. Ethan's heart leapt into his throat. He was off his own horse in a flash, running through the snow toward her. By the time he got there, she was sitting up, catching her breath, but seemed to be in one piece. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands checking her shoulders and arms, his voice tight with panic. "I am fine," Clara said, though she sounded shaky. "Just got the wind knocked out of me. Is the horse okay?" Ethan barely glanced at the gelding, which was already back on its feet. "The horse is fine. You could have broken your neck. But I did not. I am fine, Ethan, really." He could not seem to let her go, his eyes searching her face as if to convince himself she was truly all right. The fear from seeing her fall was still pumping through him. "Ethan," Clara said softly, putting her gloved hands over his. "I am okay. You can let go. I do not want." He admitted it, and the raw honesty of his words seemed to hang in the cold air, shocking them both. Out there in the snow, with cattle all around and the ranch hands pretending to be busy, something between them changed for good. All those walls they had so carefully built suddenly seemed foolish and fragile. Samuel hollered from a short distance away, "Boss, we better get these cattle moving before they decide to scatter." The moment was gone. Ethan helped Clara up. He gave the horse a proper look over this time before helping her back into the saddle. But things were different now. He could feel it, and he knew she did too, catching her looking at him when she thought he would not notice. By the time they got the herd back and the fence patched, night was falling. The men went to the bunkhouse, but Ethan just followed Clara to the main house. Inside, Martha sized them up with one look and, without a single question, started heating water and putting food on the stove. Have you ever been so scared of getting hurt that you just stopped living altogether? That was Ethan, walled off on his own ranch until Clara blew in like a winter storm. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold and strands of hair had escaped her braid to dance in the wind. She looked worn out and beautiful all at once. Ethan couldn't shake the image of how close she'd come to getting seriously busted up. Clara pulled off her gloves and said, "Stop looking at me like that." "Like what?" he asked. "Like I'm a glass doll about to shatter. I told you, I'm fine." "You could have been killed," he insisted. "But I wasn't. That's the deal with taking chances, Ethan. Sometimes you lose, sometimes you win. You can't control every little thing." "I never should have let you come," he muttered. She turned on him then, her eyes hot. "You didn't let me do a thing. I chose to come. I chose to help, and I'd do it again, even knowing I'd take a tumble. Stop trying to wrap me in cotton. I can make my own choices." "I'm not trying to," he started, but she cut him off. "You are. You're trying to keep me safe the same way you keep yourself safe, by never taking a risk. But that's not living, Ethan. That's just existing, real careful-like." She walked out, leaving him standing there with Martha, the cook, who was suddenly mighty interested in the kitchen floor. "Don't you start," he warned Martha. "Start what? I didn't say a word." "You're thinking awful loud," he grumbled. Martha just smiled into her stew pot. "All I'm thinking is that girl's got you pegged, and it's high time somebody did." Ethan didn't have the fight in him to argue. He was too tired, too rattled, and filled with feelings he couldn't put a name to. He went to his study, poured a whiskey he didn't touch, and stared into space. All he could see was Clara's horse stumbling, that one long second before he knew she was okay. He'd been terrified. Not the calculated fear of a business deal gone wrong, but a raw, gut-deep terror that comes from almost losing something that truly matters. And realizing that Clara mattered, that she'd somehow become essential without him even noticing, was scarier than any fall. She was right. He'd been so busy dodging pain that he'd forgotten what it felt like to feel anything. 7 years of quiet control. And in 1 month, this gentle widow, with her sharp eyes and quiet honesty, had torn it all down. The question was, what in the world was he going to do about it? He found her in the library later that night, just like he knew he would. She was in her robe, her hair down, reading by the lamp. She looked up as he came in, and a silent understanding passed between them. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Can't stop thinking," he answered. He didn't take his usual chair. Instead, he sat on the sofa near hers, closer than they'd ever been before. "Clara, I need to tell you something." She put her book down, giving him her full attention. "When you fell today," he started, searching for the right words, "I've spent 7 years making sure I never cared about a single thing enough to be wrecked by losing it. I built this ranch, made my fortune. But I kept it all at a distance. No ties, no weak spots. Nothing that could be taken away and leave me broken like Margaret did." "I know," Clara said softly. "But watching you fall, it made me realize I failed. I completely failed at keeping you at a distance. Somehow you became someone I care about, and it scares the hell out of me." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this?" she finally asked. "Because I'm tired of playing it safe," he said. "Because you were right. I don't want to wake up in another 7 years and realize I wasted them all being afraid." He held up a hand. "I'm not asking you for anything. I know you said you don't want a husband or promises. I'm not asking you to change that. I just needed you to know the walls are gone. You saw right through 'em anyway, and I'm done pretending." Clara stood and walked to the window, her back to him. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. You know what I thought about when that horse went down? In that split second? I thought about how stupid I'd been. Not for falling, but for wasting this past month being so careful. I've been here trying not to want anything, trying not to feel anything. I was trying not to admit that being around you has made me start hoping again, even after I told myself hope was a dangerous thing. Oh. She turned to face him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I meant it when I said I didn't want a husband. I sure don't want what I had with Jacob, that empty business deal where we shared a house but never our hearts. But this thing we've been building right here in the late hours and quiet moments, this is something else entirely. It's something I never knew I was missing. Ethan walked over slow, giving her a chance to back away, but she held her ground. He got close enough to see the firelight in her eyes and count the freckles across her nose. "So, what are we going to do?" he asked soft-like. "We're both scared. We both think this is a crazy idea and have every reason to walk. But we're not gonna, are we?" Clara's voice was just a whisper. "No, I don't reckon we are." "Then I guess we just keep on. One day at a time. We stay honest and we stay patient. We don't make promises we can't keep, but we stop pretending this isn't real." "That's terrifying," Ethan said. "Yes," she agreed. "But being safe is starting to feel a whole lot scarier than taking this chance." He reached up real slow and brushed a stray piece of hair from her face. She leaned into his touch, a small thing that felt bigger than any words. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to care for someone without just waiting for them to walk out on me." "I don't know how to let someone in without expecting them to use it against me," Clara answered. "Well, I suppose we'll have to learn together then." They stood there on the edge of something huge and impossible. Then, Clara, bless her heart, did something brave. She closed the last little bit of space between them and rested her forehead on his chest. It was a show of trust so big it stole Ethan's breath. He wrapped his arms around her gentle, like she was precious china. Her hands came up and gripped his shirt. They didn't kiss or say a thing. They just held each other, knowing the safe distance between them was gone for good. "This is likely a mistake," Clara mumbled into his shirt. "Probably," Ethan agreed, and he felt her give a little laugh. "We're both going to get spooked and try to run at some point, almost for certain. We ought to at least warn the other one before we bolt. Seems fair." She pulled back to look at him, her smile a little shaky but real. "What do we tell folks? Martha's going to know something's up. Samuel's already suspicious." "We tell them the truth," Ethan said, surprised by how sure he sounded. "That we're two lonely people trying to see if we can build something real without all the games that broke us before." "And if they ask if we're courting?" she asked. "I think we're doing something that don't have a name yet, something that's just for us. Is that okay?" "That's more than okay," Ethan said, and he meant it with his whole soul. They parted ways reluctantly, like two folks who'd just found air after nearly drowning. Clara gave him a quick, light kiss on the cheek that wrecked him completely, then left him in the dark with his heart pounding. He was terrified, all right. But under that fear was something that felt a whole lot like peace. By morning, gossip was already making the rounds on the ranch. One of the young hands saw the boss holding Mrs. Hale by the library window, and it didn't look like business. Samuel found Ethan in the barn. "So you and Clara?" he asked, not beating around the bush. "There's no me and Clara," Ethan said, focusing hard on a horse's hoof. "Son, I've known you since you were knee-high. Don't you lie to me." Ethan stood up straight. "We're figuring it out. That's all I know." Samuel's expression softened. "Is she good to you?" The question wasn't about money or status, just that one simple thing. "She sees me," Ethan said quietly. "Just me. Not the ranch or the name. And she's decided I'm worth the trouble." "Well then, that's all that matters, boss." Clara got a similar talk from Martha in the kitchen. "So, you and Ethan, does everyone on this ranch have eyes in the back of their head?" Clara sighed. "Small town, honey. Are you happy?" Clara thought on it for a real moment, then gave a slow nod. "I think I'm starting to be. I'm scared to death and it could all go wrong, but yes, I think I am." "Then the rest is just noise," Martha said. "Y'all are grown. You're both smart enough to know what you're doing and brave enough to try. That's worth a heck of a lot. The days that followed settled into a new kind of normal. They still had their morning coffee, but now his hand might brush hers, reaching for the pot, a little shock of lightning they both ignored. Evenings were still in the library, but now they sat on the same sofa, shoulders touching. They talked about his plans for the ranch and her memories of home. Clara told him about her daddy and how she learned to make herself small and quiet. Ethan told her about his own father working himself into an early grave for this land. They took it slow. There were no big declarations, just small moments that felt like promises. The way his hand would find her back to steady her. The way she'd touch his jaw when she thought he wasn't looking, just to make sure he was real. And they both started sleeping better, like just knowing someone finally understood was enough to quiet the bad dreams. About 2 weeks later, Clara found Ethan in his study late at night, looking worn down to the bone over his account books. She came up behind him without a word and started rubbing the knots out of his shoulders. Ethan let his head fall forward with a groan. "You don't have to do that. I know. I want to." After a bit, he caught one of her hands and pulled her around to face him. "Move in," he said. Clara blinked. "I already live here." "No, he searched for the words, stop sleeping down the hall. Stay with me. Not for anything more than what we have, but because I'm tired of walking past your door every night. I'm tired of waking up by myself. I just want—" "Yes," Clara cut in softly. "Yes, I want that too." That night, she moved her things into his room. They laid there talking till sunup, curled together under the heavy quilts, warm and safe and not alone anymore. They didn't do anything more because they both knew they weren't ready. There were still old hurts to heal. But just holding each other felt like its own kind of promise. For the first time in 7 long years, Ethan Blackwood fell asleep without his guard up. He didn't dream about being left or betrayed. He dreamed of a spring thaw coming to a frozen land, of ice melting and new things growing. He dreamed of a future that felt nothing like the fortress he'd built and everything like coming home. Spring took its sweet time coming to Montana that year. But inside that ranch house, a warmth had already taken hold that had nothing to do with the weather. The change in the house was plain to see. Laughter now bounced off walls that had been silent for years. The lamplight seemed warmer. Breakfast wasn't a lonely habit anymore, but a shared, quiet moment before the day's work. One morning in early spring, Ethan woke to find Clara propped on an elbow, just watching him. "How long you been awake?" he asked, his voice raspy with sleep. "Long enough to figure something out," she said, her tone suddenly serious. "We've been doing this for nearly 3 months, living together. And we've never once talked about what comes next." Ethan's chest tightened. "Do we have to?" "I think so. Because I was lying here watching you and I realized I'm not afraid anymore." She took a breath. "Well, that's not quite true. I'm terrified, but I'm more scared of not saying what I feel than I am of saying it and everything going wrong." He sat up, the blankets pooling around him. "Clara, let me say this," she said, her voice steady, "before I lose my nerve. When I came here, I told myself I just wanted a job and a fresh start. I was lying to myself. I was lying because wanting things had hurt me before, and I figured if I stopped wanting, I'd stop hurting." "I know the feeling," Ethan said quietly. "But I've learned something these past few months," she went on. "Pretending you don't want things doesn't stop them from coming. It just stops you from enjoying them when they do. And somewhere between the coffee and the chores, I stopped pretending I didn't want this. I stopped pretending I didn't want you." The words hung in the quiet room, honest and brave. "I love you, Ethan," Clara said simply. "I don't need you, and you don't need me. And maybe that's exactly why this works. But I love you. I love your stubbornness and your kindness, and the way you pretend not to care about things you care about with your whole heart." He just stared at her, unable to speak. "I'm not asking you to say it back," she continued, her voice trembling just a bit. "I'm not asking for any promises that used to scare us both. I had to tell you the truth." Ethan finally found his voice. "The night you fell," he began. I realized I'd been so busy protecting myself from another Margaret that I nearly missed what was right in front of me. You are nothing like her, and I've been a fool. He reached for her hand, his fingers twining with hers. I love you too, Clara. I think I have since you first stood in my kitchen and told me all you wanted was a fair day's wage for a fair day's work. I was just too scared to admit it because admitting it meant risking everything all over again. Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but she was smiling. So what do we do now? I think, Ethan said, pulling her close, we stop protecting ourselves from each other. We stop waiting for it all to go wrong. We just love each other, as honestly as we can, and trust that it's enough. That simple? She asked. That complicated, he corrected, and he kissed her. He kissed her like a man who'd finally stopped running from his own heart. They lay there as the sun came up, talking and planning, finally brave enough to believe in a future. It didn't feel like a trap or a business deal, it felt like open country. But life on a ranch is never simple. Their first real test arrived a week later. A man rode up to the ranch carrying a letter for Ethan. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar, and it made his blood run cold. It was from Margaret. He stood in his study holding it when Clara found him. She took one look at his face and quietly closed the door behind her. What is that? It is a letter from Margaret Chellenham. He just stood there, unable to make his hands open the thing. Clara walked over, gently took the envelope, and set it on his desk. Do you want to be by yourself for this? No, Ethan answered immediately. I am done doing things alone. That was always my problem, thinking I had to handle everything by myself. Stay with me. Always, Clara promised, and her simple, steady voice gave him the strength he needed. He finally tore open the letter. With her standing so close, he felt anchored. The words were written in Margaret's fancy handwriting, and it felt like unlocking a door from a long time ago. She wrote that she hoped he was doing well. She said she had heard he had built a good life out in Montana. And then she said she was writing to give him an apology that was 7 years too late. She admitted she had been wrong about everything. Wrong about his life there, wrong about what kind of life was good, and wrong about what was truly important. I went to Boston and built the life I thought I wanted. I married a professor and got the fancy house. And Ethan, I am just plain miserable. It took me too long to figure out that comfort is not the same as happiness. A life can look perfect on the outside but be hollow as a gourd. I traded true love for an easy life, and it was the worst deal a person could make. I am not writing to ask you to take me back. I know I hurt you too much for that. I am writing to say you were right. Love is worth more than things. You deserved a woman who would choose you, and I pray you found her. I will always regret losing you. I just hope it gives you some peace to know you were right about it all. Be well, Ethan. Be happy. Ethan read Margaret's letter twice, then set it down. He expected anger, maybe the satisfaction of being right. Instead, he just felt a deep sadness for her. What are you thinking? Clara asked softly. He looked at her, the woman who had torn down the walls around his heart. I feel sorry for her, he said honestly, and grateful. If she had not left, I never would have built this life or become the man who was ready for you. All that old pain was just preparing me for what really matters. Clara's smile was shaky. That is a mighty generous way to see it. It is the truth. Margaret chose fear, and she lives with it. My choices came from pain, and they led me straight to you. He pulled her close, feeling her steady heartbeat. You chose me because we were honest. That is worth more than all the things Margaret and I used to chase. So, what will you do with the letter? She asked. Ethan glanced toward the fireplace. I think I will burn it. Not out of spite, but because that story is finished. She needs to find her peace, and I need to stop letting old hurts define me. He tossed the letter into the flames. They stood hand in hand, watching 7 years of painful memories turn to ash. As the last piece disappeared, Ethan spoke. I need to ask you something. And please know, this is not about her. This is about us. Clara turned to face him, her eyes questioning. Marry me, Ethan said plainly. Not because it is convenient. Marry me because what we have built together is real. Marry me because it is honest and imperfect and worth making forever. I love you, and I want to spend my life proving it. Clara caught her breath. Ethan, you told me marriage was a one-time thing for you, and you came here to get away from being a wife. That was before us, before this trust we built. I am not asking you to be anyone but yourself. Just do it as my wife. Tears streamed down her face, but she smiled. You are supposed to let a woman answer before you talk her ear off. Then answer me, Ethan said, his voice full of hope. Yes, Clara said clearly. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, to imperfect and real. Yes, to all of it. They sealed their promise with a kiss that was both an end and a new beginning, the end of being alone and the beginning of being found. They were a mess of laughing and crying, finally letting go of all the armor they had worn for so long. The news shot across the ranch faster than a prairie fire. Martha just wept and hugged them both, saying she knew they were meant for each other from that very first morning. Samuel gave Ethan a firm handshake, his eyes full of pride, then pulled him into a hug he rarely gave. About damn time, son, he whispered. The ranch hands threw a wild party in the bunkhouse that night. Robert the Wrangler summed it all up when he raised his glass. He toasted to the boss, who turned down every woman chasing his money, and to the woman who only came looking for a job but found a whole lot more. 6 weeks later, on a bright May morning, they were married. The world felt fresh and green, full of promise. Clara had made her own dress, a simple cream-colored thing that was beautiful because it was so plain. Ethan wore his best suit, an old one he kept for business deals back when he still felt he had something to prove. They stood in the parlor with the windows wide open, letting in the spring air and the sound of horses. Ethan looked right at her. I promise to truly see you, he said. Not just your strength, but your fears. I will love you for who you are, not for what you do. I promise to be imperfect with you and trust that you will stay. I will build a life with you, not just next to you. And I will choose you every single day. Clara's voice was strong, even with tears in her eyes. I promise to trust you with the truth. I promise to love you with everything I have, without holding back. I will always remind you that you are more than this ranch, more than anything you can ever own. I promise to be your partner in all of it, she finished. When the preacher said they were married, Ethan kissed his wife like a man who finally understood what happiness felt like. And Clara kissed him back like a woman who was done just surviving and was ready to live. It was a simple, joyful party afterward. Good food, better folks, and dancing out in the barn. Later, Ethan stood watching Clara dance with Samuel. The old foreman came up beside him. You did good, boss, he said quietly. Real good. Ethan shook his head. I just got lucky. Samuel smiled a little. No, luck is stumbling onto something valuable. You built this. You made yourself a man worthy of a woman like her, and she got brave enough to want you. That ain't luck. That's hard work. Ethan watched his wife, her face glowing in the lantern light, and knew Samuel was right. This was something they had chosen. They had both been broken by life in their own ways, but instead of letting that keep them apart, they had used it to understand one another. Late that night, when the ranch was quiet under a blanket of stars, they stood on their bedroom balcony. Clara leaned against Ethan's chest, and his arms came around her. Do you remember what you told me that first night in the library? She asked. About how you were always waiting for good things to be taken away? I remember. Are you still waiting? He thought about that deep-seated fear he had carried for years. To his surprise, it was mostly gone. It was just a small thing now, not the beast that used to run his life. No, he said, feeling the truth of it deep in his bones. I am not waiting for it to end anymore. I am just thankful for right now. Good, Clara whispered, turning to face him, because I am not going anywhere. I am not staying for any of those things that used to seem so important. I am staying for this, for you, for us, and for the life we are building right here. Ethan had to hear it. He asked, even when it gets tough? She smiled and said, Especially when it gets tough, that is when it counts the most. They just stood there for a good long while. Two people who had been alone for so long, they had forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen. Now they were wrapped up in each other, and the promise of more mornings just like this one. The years to come were a mix of easy and hard. Marriage was not always a smooth ride. They had their squabbles and misunderstandings. Old hurts sometimes came back to the surface. But they always did the work. They kept choosing each other even on the days it was hard. Ethan learned to measure his success differently. It was not about profit or acres anymore. It was in the sound of Clara's laughter filling up rooms that had been silent for too long. It was in the children who came later, bringing noise and life into the house. He saw it in the way his men looked at him, not just as a boss, but as a man who had figured out what really mattered. Clara truly came into her own. She took over the household books and had a mind for business as sharp as Ethan's. She even started a little school for the ranch hands' children right there in her kitchen. She raised their own kids with that same mix of tough love and common sense that first caught Ethan's eye. On some cold nights, they would end up back in that library where it all started. They would talk about the people they used to be. The hard-hearted rancher who turned away 20 women. The quiet widow who told herself she wanted nothing. Two souls who had built walls around their hearts and almost missed out on happiness. Clara rested her head on his shoulder one night and asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not come here that day?" "I try not to," Ethan said honestly, "because I reckon I would still be rattling around this big house all by myself. I would still think that being untouchable was the same thing as being strong. And I would probably be working for somebody else, still believing that not wanting anything meant I was content." "We were a couple of cowards," Ethan said, but his voice was kind. "We were just scared," Clara corrected him gently. "Then we found each other and figured out how to be brave." Ethan kissed her head. "You know, the funny thing is, I spent all those years looking for someone who wanted me and not what I had. But you showed me it is not that simple. You wanted me, sure. But you also wanted the life we could build together, the safety, the partnership, and there was nothing wrong with that. It was just honest." "Margaret was wrong about what mattered," Clara said. "But you were wrong, too. You thought that loving what you built made the love for the person less real. Real love is not one or the other, it is both. And I love you and I love this life we have. They are not two different things. They are woven together so tight you cannot find the seam." "When did you get so smart?" Ethan asked with a smile. "The day I married a man stubborn enough to make me think harder about everything." Clara looked up at him, her eyes bright in the firelight. "You know, we almost missed this. We almost let fear win. If I had been too proud to ask for a job, if you had been too defensive to see anything but another gold digger, if either one of us had been a little less brave at the right moment, we would have missed everything." "But we did not," Ethan said, his voice firm. "We were brave enough, and we keep on being brave enough, every single day." "Every day," Clara agreed, and she sealed it with a kiss. Outside, the snow started to fall again, blanketing the land in a fresh coat of white. But inside that house, a warmth had settled in for good. In the kitchen, bread was rising for breakfast. Upstairs, children were sleeping soundly. And in the library, two people who once planned to face the world alone sat holding each other. They were so grateful they had found the courage to face it together. The cold had left Ethan Blackwood's heart years ago. In its place was something better than safety, and more valuable than any ranch he could have built by himself. In its place was home. It was not perfect, but it was honest and real. It was built on two people brave enough to choose each other, day after day. And in the end, that was worth more than all the money in the world. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.